Well, there are 20,000 new Jeffrey Epstein documents to go through because House Republicans on the Oversight Committee released them on Wednesday. House Democrats released some emails just ahead of those Republican emails, about 3 of them in particular, that definitely seemed to implicate Donald Trump, although we're going to go over some of the details of why or why not they did, what actually we are learning from some of these new puzzle pieces. As a reminder, subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the full premium experience of the show. Tomorrow's edition is a long interview with Emily Kopp, one of the few reporters, investigative journalists, still staying on the COVID lab leak beat, who has a new scoop on the CIA and the Director of National Intelligence as it relates to what was going on in the years leading up to the pandemic. So you don't want to miss that. Subscribe here on the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, let's go to these new emails because first, here's the timeline of what happened on Wednesday. House Democrats on the Oversight Committee, which has been pulling for these new emails, released a series of emails between Jeffrey Epstein, Michael Wolff, Ghislaine Maxwell, and these sorts. About, in one case, what we see is Michael Wolff, who's an author, highly dubious author when it comes to the kind of journalistic quality of these books. Wolff is sort of wink, wink, nod, nodded at being a fabulist before in his, I guess, writing about the Trump administration, but now he's not just doing writing. He's become a very prolific Instagrammer, TikToker, purporting to kind of spill the beans on Donald Trump's life. What we see in these emails is Michael Wolff actually, back in 2015, tipping off Jeffrey Epstein over email, tipping him off that he heard CNN was going to ask Trump a question about his ties to Epstein in a Republican primary debate, again, all the way back in 2015. Wolff then proceeds to strategize with Epstein about an answer they could potentially give to Trump to prepare him for that question. And the email is really shocking from Michael Wolff. So he says, I think you should let him, referring to Trump, hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him generating a debt. Pause right there. Generating a debt. That is a suggestion from Michael Wolff, who purports now to be some sort of journalist, where he is counseling Epstein to potentially blackmail Donald Trump. Then he goes on to say, of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say, Jeffrey's a great guy and he's gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is also to be outlawed in a Trump regime. So, again, that is from Michael Wolff, and it was released by by the House Democrats as part of this tranche that was given to the Oversight Committee from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. And there's another email in here from Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell. This one is in 2011, and it says, this is very cryptic, I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redacted victim. Spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Maxwell replies, I have been thinking about that. ... Well, Republicans then fired back that the redacted victim's name was Virginia Giuffre. And Giuffre, of course, is somebody who I think actually is getting kind of unfairly maligned, but does have real credibility problems. I don't think it's fair at all to dismiss everything that Virginia Giuffre has said about the Epstein operation, about Donald Trump. Giuffre has basically exonerated Donald Trump, said she hadn't seen, she sadly passed since, but said before she passed, basically she did exonerate Donald Trump, said she didn't see wrongdoing from Donald Trump. Trump. So Republicans then sort of fired back at Democrats and said, interesting that you redacted Giuffre's name. Another reason that they may have redacted Giuffre's name would simply be they know there are questions about Giuffre's credibility. And so that's possible too. There's an email in here from 2019, Jeffrey Epstein to Michael Wolff, victim, redacted, Mar-a-Lago. Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls. He asked Ghislaine to stop. Now, that's not new because Trump himself has said he asked Ghislaine to stop poaching, or he asked the kind of Epstein operation to stop poaching girls like Virginia Giuffre from Mar-a-Lago. Giuffre worked at the spa at Mar-a-Lago where she says she was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell to start coming into the Epstein operation. And we already knew that. That was out there publicly. Now, these emails, I think more information is always better information. And the 20,000 released by the Oversight Committee Republicans, the majority of the committee, we're seeing more and more from elites like Larry Summers, where they're in the orbit of Epstein and are very casually exchanging emails with Epstein. And you can understand why the political class is pressuring Republicans and Democrats both not to keep releasing more and more information, right? There wasn't a lot more information that came from the Biden administration. We are getting more documents. Again, this was House Republicans. House Republicans released the Alex Acosta interview transcript. They released these documents, these tens of thousands of documents. At the same time, of course, the Trump administration really does not want that bipartisan discharge petition between Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie that will compel more and more document releases if it passes. They have the numbers for it to pass. They have sworn in Adalita Grijalva, the last member that they needed to tip the balance so that they could get that discharge petition. It's a parliamentary maneuver that forces a vote, despite House Speaker Mike Johnson not wanting to vote on this resolution that compels more disclosures from the Justice Department. So that's all happening at the same time as Republicans are releasing more documents. It's kind of the split screen of the Trump administration that you get right now, or of MAGA during the Trump administration that you get right now, and the split screen with Democrats who are much less interested in the story during the Biden administration and are now trying to make it one of the big factors to disqualify Trump 2.0. And let's just say here, stipulate, the reality is that no presidential administration is going to release a smoking gun. They will say they released X number of emails, but you can always keep one email that the public doesn't know about from the public, because the public doesn't know about the email. It doesn't even know what to ask, whether it's being covered up or not. For the most part, there are exceptions to that. So the likelihood that any disclosure is going to come from the government that functions as a smoking gun is enormously low. What we can start to learn, though, is as those drop site articles cover from these emails that were likely hacked from Ehud Barak, from the Israeli intelligence community, by Iranians. What we can do is start piecing together these scraps of information and coming up with a clearer picture of just how Epstein was operating with the intelligence community. And that is now beyond the shadow of a doubt accurate. According to these drop site reports, Jeffrey Epstein was very obviously facilitating intelligence operations, particularly you can see with the case of Ehud Barak, but he was very much pulling the puppet strings of geopolitics behind the scenes. We see that in these emails, plain as day. And so every other email that is released now needs to be viewed through that exact lens, because that is, if you know what's happening behind the scenes, you then know the American intelligence community was almost certainly aware of what was happening on Jeffrey Epstein's Gmail, let alone the private conversations that he's setting up on this Gmail account. And you have to then read everything else through that lens, because the American intelligence community was likely aware of it. What is he saying? What is Epstein saying when he's saying back in 2011, that dog that hasn't barked is Trump? He's saying Trump has never once been mentioned, despite spending hours at the Epstein house with Virginia Giuffre. Quote, I'm 75% there. Very, very cryptic. Ghislaine says she's been thinking about that as well. Ghislaine Maxwell has been moved to minimum security prison, lower security prison. She has been given a service puppy. Reports suggest her fellow inmates are tired of the special treatment that she's been given after she cooperated with Deputy AG Todd Blanche and sat for interviews with Deputy AG Todd Blanche. Quite interesting, right? The transcripts of those interviews, Ghislaine Maxwell is basically also exonerating Donald Trump. And so this is a conversation she was having back in 2011 about Trump not cooperating with authorities, at least not publicly. What does that mean? Again, if there was a smoking gun on Donald Trump, would the Biden administration have released it? Probably yes. But why would multiple presidential administrations try to fight more and more disclosures? Well, it's because the picture that emerges is exactly like what DropSite is putting together. It looks like a very obvious intelligence operation where there was complicity, at the very least, with a sex trafficker. So that's what's being protected. Is it flattering information for Donald Trump that he was mentioned so many times, or that he was running in these circles with Jeffrey Epstein? Absolutely not. I'm sure he does not want that information out there, and does not want increasing information out there. So I think that's quite obvious. It's bad. On the other hand, is it going to get that much worse for Donald Trump? It's already pretty bad. He's already in the birthday book. He already was, friends with Epstein for a while. Yes, it does look like he broke off his relationship with Epstein. That is a much better look, of course. But also, there are genuine government. I mean, if you go back to theories about the Kennedy assassination, if you go back to theories about the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, the MLK assassination, all of these different operations, some of which saw disclosure during the Church Committee era, a lot of times the reason there was resistance for transparency or resistance towards transparency is simply that these organizations look really bad. These intelligence organizations look really bad. They'll say it compromises sources. That was still their excuse about the Kennedy files up until very recently. I'm sure some people will still maintain that, that people could be put in danger. Sources could be put in danger. And I'm sure, the Epstein saga is much more recent. I'm sure that's similarly an excuse that many in the intelligence community will mount as more and more information comes out. But that, of course, would be confirming there's a sources and methods question to be broached with Epstein. So we're going to see where this goes. But, there are 20,000 emails right now that people are putting the pieces together of. So there is more to come. And that's kind of the bottom line here. The discharge petition is very likely to pass on the House floor. That means there are bipartisan questions that aren't going away from Republicans, Trump's own coalition, demanding that we get closer and closer to the truth about what happened with Epstein. Transparency is demanded. This is a drain the swamp administration, and the Epstein saga is seen as a drain the swamp story. It is seen as something that epitomizes the swamp. So that's not going away anytime soon at all. This will continue. We're going to continue putting the pieces together, and a fuller picture is going to emerge. And in all likelihood, it is going to resemble more and more an intelligence operation, a vast intelligence operation that the U.S. government was aware of, complicit in, fueling, and other governments were as well. So unlikely that we ever stumble across like some massive smoking gun. The government may have destroyed those files. Anything that resembled the smoking gun may have been destroyed, and certainly is not going to be released unless we're talking decades down the road, like we're getting closer and closer to with the Kennedy files. But what we are going to be able to know is more bits and pieces that show very clearly what was happening, even if we don't have it put in writing. The U.S. government, from the U.S. government, we are operating a blackmail ring with Jeffrey Epstein, right? We're just getting closer to being able to put the pieces together and see, like a puzzle. You may still have 10 pieces left or 100 pieces left in a 1,000-piece puzzle that you can't find, but you have a pretty clear picture at 800 or 900 pieces. So thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Undercurrents. We will be back tomorrow with more. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and over at undercurrents.tv for the free premium experience of the show as well. See you back here with more soon.